Hey, hello and welcome to the channel. This is going to be a video that is more of a comprising of knowledge than it is me actually going over a tutorial or anything. That's because I've got a very specific question here that covers a large topic. So I wanted to just look at everywhere that I know where there's good information. I've already posted some of these links to the person, but I thought I'd make a video just talking about it as well. Because when it comes to downloading Unreal, especially right now in Unreal 5, it's really easy to get into it and go into these content examples, and they're all quite basic. But it can also be quite difficult to know how they get to scenes like the Matrix scene, which they're currently demoing a lot right now. And so when you get to looking at that stuff, you might not even know that materials and shaders and textures are, if you're brand new, you don't even know that stuff exists. So you don't even know what to Google, where to Google it. This person that asked the question does know what they're doing, obviously, in terms of, substance designer for textures and all this sort of stuff. You've got to know your softwares. But if you don't know the terminology or where is good to look, then yeah, you can get pretty stuck. So this video is just me looking through things like the content examples and the Matrix scene and discussing how I would learn what this person is asking. So I will just open that up real quick. Specifically, they're asking if I could make a tutorial that demonstrates how to apply substance designer materials into Unreal Engine with increasingly more detailed projects, things like pillars of varying heights, and all using the same material, things like that. Complex materials are applied to specific regions of a mesh or anything you think would help grasp that concept. So yeah, when it comes to just grasping the concept of understanding where things go from Substance to Unreal, there are some fancy things inside Unreal that can let you generate textures within Unreal, but it's never something, well, as soon as I heard of it, it sounded really interesting. When you've got a substance and it's a dynamic material, let's say it's bricks, and you'll be able to pick how many bricks are in that texture. So we've actually got a bricks material over here. If these were substances, then you would be able to change the number of things here. But that's not actually how real-time textures are usually used, and doing it in Unreal is convenient, but it's not that much of an issue to have Substance open. So usually you're exporting these textures, these materials, which are hopefully familiar with standard texture workflows, and they come in as static images anyway. So really the question is, how does that translate to then being applied and reused most efficiently? And that's where the subject just goes crazy, because I personally look into masked textures a lot. So for example, this height would be a single channel mask. It's usually better to pack textures. So there's actually an example right there. Say this texture here is actually packed, so the channels all have different contents. So an image is made out of those 4 channels. I'm trying to think of a tutorial that explains that a lot better. I guess you could look at some of the layered material stuff that I've got on my channel and try and understand it from there. I'm not sure if I explain that in terms of how that is, but hopefully that makes sense. I'll put a link to some of the links in the description. And then when you're stepping away from the texture side of things, the first step is probably advanced UV workflows. So understanding UV Unwrapping and how that can be used to leverage textures in a way that's more interesting than just a tiling texture like this is going to be only really used for that one purpose. There's not much you can do with that. Maybe like if it was, maybe if it wasn't bricks, like this grass, maybe you could use the roughness channel for something else, because at that point you might be able to use it as like a moss roughness channel, and that would start reusing things. But that's really quite specific. So I do have examples here. So I've got my own video where I'm starting the dark there, and that this is going over. Well, I was trying to go over a beginner's intro to UV unwrapping. So I'll put that link in the description. I use a prop that I made before. It just shows off some of the ways that you can get turned around when doing UVs and the best practices and all sorts of stuff. So that might be quite interesting, but that's to do with a prop. If you really want to get leverage more out of UV unwrapping, this is a really good tutorial for actually unwrapping the objects. But these tutorials over here, like flipped normals, what are trim sheets? You're going to need to know what, to find out what trim sheets are, you need to actually know that they exist. So if you don't know that trim sheets exist and you've never heard of them before, go check out what are trim sheets, and it's just a way of laying out textures, especially for environment objects, in a way that is highly repeatable. So if you've never heard of that, this is a Blender tutorial, and you can see how that gets leveraged across multiple assets and reuses that space in the most efficient way. Very good. And then this guy, I don't think he uploads very much anymore, unfortunately, but he's got some tutorials from, I think, when he started doing his ArtStation challenge in 2019.
So if you're
so we can have a look at that. It's in Maya, but you don't need to watch tutorials just for one software. You can actually, obviously, just understand what between different softwares. You don't have to listen to what they're actually pressing in terms of buttons, but try and understand what they do and why they're doing it, So that's a really good trim sheet tutorial there as well. That's going to get you most of the way there. And then when it actually comes to the matrix scene, well, I'm not going to go there yet, actually. We're still looking through here and appreciate that the this is like the bare bones intro to materials. So if the matrix demo is too much for you, you're watching it, you just don't understand it, download the content examples. They're right at the top of this. You go to Marketplace, free, and Epic Games content, and then content examples are right there. You can search them, download them. The content examples is going to be your easiest intro to everything. Like, there's so many times that I've just not looked at the content examples, and I've come back to it, and the solution to my issue was already right there. It's already explained. So if you're not clicking through all of these and just looking at them, even if you don't understand it, just look at them and appreciate that it's possible to do these things, and that could be very useful. So this is just a very basic overview of just kind of what each node does. You're going to want to be clicking these and opening up the examples, and then actually looking at where they're doing what they do and why they're doing what they do. Like, for example, this one might be a little bit more tricky. I'm not sure how well it explains it. Just have a look. It's talking about subsurface scattering being on. You might not necessarily find out where that setting is initially, but when you open it up and you notice, oh, the shading model. I mean, that's the section that I'm in, shading models. So you realize the shading model is what changed there. And that could be really useful to know. Yep, so that's pretty much, that covers like some really good stuff. And then there's like several maps to do with materials. So scroll down, even ones that cover like this one here, advanced materials. So we start talking about using a master material for things like color variation, which is going to give you more variation in your textures, as well as the layered material workflows that they've got. So they've added you're layering materials at that point where it could be a really good way of, well, that might be the most optimum way of working, because you can see this is like a prop example, but potentially it uses tiling textures and stuff, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, so there's some advanced material examples. So I don't understand this, but as soon as someone comes to me, I've never looked at that and understood how it works, but I know it exists. So as soon as someone asks me like, oh, can we get some motion blur on the wheels of this thing, then I would be like, sure, straight to the content examples, figure out how it's done, and then that's pretty much how you go through that. So not everyone's computer is going to be able to run this. In fact, I'm going to close this one, the whole idea. I'm going to close as many things as possible while I open up this city scene. That's why I didn't have it open in the first place, because I don't want that running in the background while I'm trying to explain things. Yeah, because those recommended specs are crazy. And I don't actually understand, because I'm not a programmer, I don't understand why computers need to be so much more powerful to run things, considering this demo can run on the PS5. The PS5 definitely doesn't have any of those features. Probably quite naive of me to say, but that's just how it is. And in the same way here, I mean, this is really advanced stuff. Like, I look at anyone's looking at this stuff and being like, how are they doing that? Like, it's crazy, some of the things. But again, you don't have to understand how it's done. You just need to understand that it's possible, and then you can break it down when you need it. So looking through and being like, right, well, they've got wet roads here. That's cool. How are they putting the water on? Is it procedural or not? Do I need to understand how they do any of this stuff? And then obviously, eventually, clicking through things might not be the most useful thing in the world. So that's why they've got their YouTube channel with all of these. Hopefully, if you're looking into videos like this, hopefully the Unreal Engine section of videos are just all red. You've seen them, you've got them on in the background, you're listening. That's kind of what I do, and maybe I play it multiple times sometimes if I'm trying to understand something. And yeah, so that's kind of what I want to explain. Like, if you're talking about wanting to understand how it's done, you gotta get your hands on stuff like this, and they make it available to you. I mean, this again is super modern workflow stuff here, so it's not fully explained, but they're doing some crazy stuff that is interesting to see. And yeah, it just looks so good. And even then, a lot of these assets are mega scans, which you can still click on and look at how they're done. Yeah. So I think that's it from me, and I'll see you next one.